we'll be showing exactly that behaviour and approach may be unknowingly suppressing the superpowers of your neurodiverse colleagues.
Shaila is a software engineer turned software engineering recruiter with Culture Amp and a huge advocate for diversity, equity and inclusion, especially in the tech sector.
And this is a speaker sponsor moment. Shaila Man was sponsored here today by Culture Amp. Anyone here heard of Culture Amp? Woo! Thank you, Culture Amp.
And you can get your diversity badges from Culture Amp outside on the next break. But the question on everyone's lips is, does she pair?
We had a chat last night, and of course she does. But she has some tips for pairing with people who have ADHD. It's all or nothing. You have to keep the work interesting, keep them engaged, and one way to do that is to ask lots of questions as you work through things and encourage a lot of breaks.
And now we welcome Shaila Man talking neurodiversity, a silent disability or a superpower. Come to the stage.
It doesn't matter if you love him or capital H-I-M.
Sorry. Good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for joining me today to learn about neurodiversity. I am Shaila Man, and I was a software engineer, and then I turned to recruiting, and I'm now a software engineer at Culture Amp. So I'm also a single mom with 3 teenagers, a Weimaraner, a ragdoll, a very, very poor basil plant. It was very poor last year, a little bit poor the year before, it's now deathly. So yeah, I wanted to sort of discuss the shift from the traditional sort of perspective of neurodivergent individuals as having like this silent disability, because obviously you can't see it, it's mental. And I want to shift to like a new paradigm where neurodiversity is seen as a source of superpowers. So who is neurodiverse? Literally one hand went up. Are you kidding? All of you are neurodiverse. I'm going too fast. Sorry, because I'm neurodiverse. But yeah, or something's wrong with my slides, I don't know. But yeah, you are all neurodiverse. And so that means that every single person in this room is neurologically different to each other. It's not that you have ADHD or ASD or any of the other divergences, but you're all diverse. And actually, if you think about identical twins, they are still neurologically different because of their different experiences, even though physiologically they're identical. I am not a doctor or anything like that, so take everything I say as half opinion and half sort of off the internet. And ChatGPT is amazing. But there are so many different ways of looking at neurodiversity. There are different names and labels, and wherever you look, so, you know, this is right, this is wrong, this is right, this is wrong. So I think the most important thing to take away is forgetting all the labels, is the actual underlying being inclusive, actually seeing neurodiversity as a superpower, not a disability, and actually then being inclusive. Like we do it for so many other diversities, but it's one of those things we don't, and we don't really acknowledge either, or know enough. So, what is neurodiversity? It's things, well, when I'm talking about neurodiversity, I'm talking about neurodivergence, which are individuals who are on a marginalized part of the neurodiversity spectrum. And some are more affected than others. And we call them neurodivergents. But some people will refer to them as neurodiverse people. But yeah, it's a wide range of neurological wiring in the human brain. And I actually think my dog has ADHD as well, so it might not just be humans. And that all these wiring variations are actually normal variables and valuable. And these conditions include attention deficit disorder, also known as ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, also known as ASD or autism, Tourette's syndrome, dyscalculia, what else have we got? Dyspraxia and dyslexia. They're sort of some of the most common that you'll hear. And the most common that you'll see are ADHD and autism or ASD. And they kind of have a lot of crossover as well. So for example, about 22 to 80% of people with autism also have ADHD. I say 22 to 80% because depending on where you look, you'll get all these different statistics. And when it comes to ADHD, 30 to 65% also have some level of autism. Note that ADHD is not an actual deficit of attention. It's the inability to regulate attention. It's like an all or nothing mindset. It's like when you find something a little bit boring, you cannot focus on it, no matter what. And we had this chat yesterday, and last night, yeah, and I was being asked, well, if they're bored, what do you do? How can you get them interested? You can't. The end. So people who are ADHD can have like different variants of ADHD. And I am going to focus more on ADHD, a little bit on autism as well, because that's 20% of the population apparently have a level of ADHD. And those people are likely to have some level of autism too. And it's also something that I have, ADHD and autistic. And so it's a little bit more, I know a bit more about it. So yeah, ADHD has various variants. One of them people refer to as ADD, attention deficit disorder, without the hyperactivity. It's not one or the other. ADD is part of ADHD. And people who are autistic are not amazing artists. People tend to have this mindset of, well, if you're autistic, you must be really good at painting. No, that's really small, very small minority. In fact, there's around 3 to 4 levels of autism, and the spectrum is sort of horizontal and also lateral. Vertical. And we're talking about ADHD and autism as high functioning, where individuals actually have basic life skills, where they can get dressed, eat themselves, etc. There are levels of neurodivergence where these are just very, very challenging and make it very difficult to work in an unaided way. And can be physically very debilitating. So hyperactivity is also not always manifesting as some kid running around. It can be hyperactivity in the head, where you're thinking a million miles an hour, but you're motionless physically. And it can look like laziness, but it's not. It's hyperactivity. And I was actually surprised to learn that not everyone has 20,000 thoughts a second, genuinely. If we look at ADHD, this is a really good representation. It's the ADHD iceberg by Roman Kogan, and this website is absolutely awesome. What people think of when they think of ADHD, And what it actually is, and I'm going to just share that not every single person here is going to suffer from, not every single person with ADHD is going to suffer from every single of those items listed at the bottom of the iceberg. But what you see above is people who have just difficulty with focusing, memory issues, and fidgety, but realistically underneath there's a whole lot more stuff that goes on. And this is probably why there's such a stigma attached, because it's a lot of hidden issues, and people are not comfortable sharing with these things. They feel that they would get judged. Quite often they don't actually know that they're on the spectrum. And then, they might feel that they're not going to be included because some of the manifestations and some of the issues actually are around things like communication. And if you go for a job and they're looking for really good communicators and you're autistic and give one-word answers, well, that's going to be tricky. So we do tend to mask a lot and try and conform. Talk about these superpowers, though. Software engineers are overrepresented as high-functioning ADHD and autistic people. Why is that? Anyone? Why is that? In this room, probably neurotypicals are the minority. I'm kidding, I'm not a doctor. But these are, as you see, some of the things that you might consider as disabilities or challenges can actually be unique strengths and abilities. We are overrepresented in high-functioning ADHD and autism. And I am going to, like I said, sort of focus a bit more on the ADHD side for this talk. And research shows that these particular divergencies are not only overrepresented in the industry, but we actually cater for them to a certain extent. And for example, people with ADHD, they tend to be quite creative, high energy, out-of-the-box thinking. And those on the autism spectrum can excel in areas like maths, attention to detail. Dyslexics as well can be amazing at maths. And really, all of them are really good at problem solving and pattern ID. Now, guess why engineers are overrepresented? Well, it's important to also note that a lot of well-known successful individuals are neurodivergent. Ludwig Beethoven, Albert Einstein, Tim Burton, Stephen Hawking, they've actually used their neurodiversity to their advantage, and they've made significant impact in their respective fields. And this shows that neurodivergent individuals are capable of achieving great things, and that their unique perspectives and skills are valuable to society. I'd like to focus a little bit more on why ADHD, which is probably, like I said, around 20% of the population. We're creative, we're authentic, we can hyper-focus. And I know that means the exact opposite of what it sounds like, but there's a time when you cannot focus on anything, but then it's an all or nothing thing, because when you actually focus to an extent where you can't actually remember to eat. Literally, you'll miss meals, and you can focus for hours. Anyone in this room know what that feels like? Yeah, I bet you do. Passionate, can see patterns, high energy, highly resilient, because you had to get to, through a lot of barriers and work in like a neurotypical world. Detail-focused, honest, and highly determined. But then there's some trade-offs. And these trade-offs are because we're wired in a certain way, and we're not wired in a typical way. So you can't be wired like every single dot joined to every single dot. But the fact that certain wiring of our brain means that we actually miss some areas off, just so that we can have these advantages. And so we can be quite sensitive, we can be a bit under-organized, very disorganized, actually. Sometimes we can be too organized and too meticulous, easily distracted, obsessive, routine-bound, and have energy crashes where that high energy bit, suddenly it's like, can't move, can't do anything, don't talk to me. Frustration, sensory overload, anxiety is a very big one for a lot of people who are neurodiverse, and high suicide rates. It's a fact that people who have ADHD, ASD, that the suicide rates are way higher than neurotypicals. And I just want to think for a second, like, imagine feeling like you are not the boss of your mind, and your wants and needs are actually overruled by none other than your mind, your other mind, because that's what it feels like to have ADHD, or sometimes even with autism, because you can actually be sitting going, I've got to do, or check my emails, I've got to send this email to this email to that person, I've got to do my expenses and tax return. And you're literally sitting there paralyzed with these thoughts. And you're saying, let's do it. But your body's not moving. And you're like, come on, we got to do this. Still sitting there. What the heck is going on? It's like you have a mind for your mind. And I didn't realize until a year ago that not everyone is like that. I thought it's just not everyone, right? Nope, it's just some of us. And that brings me to my world. So a little bit about me. This actually gets quite personal. Welcome to my world. As a toddler, I used to love maths. I found it easy. I think I was 4 years old when I could do sort of 8-year-old maths. My dad was very much like an advocate of teaching and mentoring. I realized he probably had ADHD too, and it is genetic. But he was obsessive about teaching me maths. And I found it easy, and I could hyper-focus on it. And interesting things just stuck in my head when I was a toddler. Go primary school. I was very good at school, and I used to help other people with their homework. I used to get paid to help people with their homework. And it was great. It was good money. It was like 10 pence a page or something like that back in England. And I sat for the grammar school entrance exam, which you had to at 10 plus. I had no tuition. It was a very tough exam, and most people thought I wouldn't have a chance. I studied some stuff the night before the exam and actually got in. And my cousin, and this is really bitchy, my cousin, same age as me, was at a private school. I was at a state school. And she had been tutored for 2 years for this exam, and guess what? She didn't get in. So I kind of was like, oh, at this point, how do I celebrate? But not. And then I used to get into difficult situations as well, where we'd have like a dinner or something, and it would be extended family. Girls were meant to be, quiet, and I would talk quite a lot. And my mother would literally pinch me on the side of my thigh, like, shut up, you're talking too much. And at that point, I was like, I don't know how not to. But I just thought I was a bad child, I guess. And then got to my teens, high school. I used to sit at the back of the classroom. All my reports say, chat's too much. Like, look at me now. Nothing's changed. Certain tube lights in classrooms. And you mentioned tube lights. So there were like 2 classes I used to absolutely hate. And I realize now it was because of the lighting. I just used to feel awful in there, and I used to get a headache, and I used to just feel ill. And it was because they had tube lights. But the things that got me through high school, and I realize now, are things like I had a homework diary, and it had to be signed by my parents every night, and the teachers would check it every day. And actually, that was a skill. And I wonder if that's just because a lot of grammar school kids are probably neurodiverse and they figured out how to deal with it without labeling. But even though I'd sit at the back of the classroom, I'd still be able to hear what's happening, but my friends who I was chatting to couldn't. They would be so distracted. So then I used to get separated and sat on my own. And then I'd be bored, like, this stuff is quite easy. So I'd switch on gas taps in the chemistry lab. Wonder what would happen if I just light it. Oh, shit. Oopsies. So I didn't do chemistry for 1 year because I was banned. And then I still really liked chemistry. There was one experiment that we did as a class experiment, making aspirin in pharmaceutical science class. And if you over-reflux, you actually produce TNT. And this huge class experiment is a bulb like this, and these blue electric looking sort of sparks flying out. And everyone's like, turn the gas off. I'm like, no, wait. Wait, it's quite colourful. What will happen next? So there's a lot of risky behaviour involved as well. And guess what? Teacher walked in, and I was sent home. But anyway, it was good. It was a good experiment. I learnt lots. And then I came to uni, and my love was technology. I used to love computers, and I'd be doing naughty things that you shouldn't really do, and I probably shouldn't talk about. I was just a bit of a hacker. And my dad wouldn't let me go to uni to do anything to do with computers. He said it was a fad. Well, hello, Daddy. You were wrong. But so I had to actually go and do medicine. And after 2 weeks, with no parents around to tell me what to do, I quit. And I actually managed to sidestep into an applied biology course, degree, and it was there was a computing component of it, which is why I chose it, and also because there was a spot. It was very difficult to get a spot in uni, like 2 weeks after this started. And I partied hard, and I put a dictaphone at the front of the lecture theatre, sat at the back, messed about. But when I had to study, I would take Pro Plus and do it all-nighters before exams. I used to have multiple groups of friends because I would find that one group of friends would be quite boring. So I'd have all these pockets of friends for different types of fun. And then I think, I finished uni. I actually did a postgraduate in computer networking and installation, and then got my first job as a research chemist while I was finishing that, and I broke their network system. It was so much fun. They were on Novell networks, and I just learned all about it. And they had no idea about security, and I kind of did. So that was fun. And then it was boring. It was boring. So I moved to London, and I was always looking for the dopamine hit. And I met someone. I met a beautiful man, and he grounded me. Interestingly, he was the exact opposite of me in a good way, and kept me grounded. So moving to London was great, and I worked for a really, really awesome company. But I can't believe the stuff I used to do. So it was a company called MediaTel, and they're the largest data for media in Europe. And I was their security network engineer, and also the person who built out and looked after all their IT equipment. And I would be on call at weekends, and shockingly, I'd be smashed 3 a.m. on Sunday morning and get a call, say, oh, the site's gone down, or data's missing or something. I have to go to the server room, and I'd be literally like, which of these screens is the one? Because I was seeing double, and actually having to swap out RAID drives and things like that in that state. It was ridiculous that they trusted me to that extent. But yeah, it was fun. It was fun times. And then sort of mid-career, I decided to have a family. I used to find it difficult to keep time. I was late for everything. If anyone criticized me, I found that really hard, and I didn't realize that's actually because of the neurodiversity I have. And I was fussy about, like, people were fussy about friends. And I think I used to probably be quite annoying. And when you're younger, your friends are like quite accepting, but as they get older, they're a little bit more particular about their company. And I found that if I got any criticism, I'd be like, bye. And I wouldn't try and deal with it. But fitting in was just harder. And at work, verbal cues were very difficult, getting more and more difficult as things got more complex. And, you know, my career was progressing a bit more. It wasn't easy stuff. I had to actually think, which, you know, doesn't like come naturally when you've never really had to. But the one thing I really enjoyed was mentoring others and teaching others to do stuff, because I found it so like fulfilling when they could do something, and you know that because you helped them do that, and you believed in them. And yeah, I then created a family, because that's what everyone my age were doing. And sadly, I had postnatal depression. I moved out of London and set up a business in Warwickshire, which is about 100 miles north of London. It's a quaint, beautiful village. And I bought an internet cafe, and I was just like bored within 6 months. So I turned it into a restaurant, and it was a 16th century building. I had to go through a lot of planning difficulties, but eventually I had 100+ employees, and I was like, oh my God, all these people trust me too. Like, this is nuts. And then the GFC happened, so I very quickly sold up the business just literally weeks before that all went pear-shaped. And then I was like, now what? So I did a master's in clinical hypnotherapy, because, you know, that makes sense. It was actually just a short 2-hour course, and I got so hyper-focused on it that I ended up doing this right up to a master's degree in it. And I moved country. I actually went to the other side of the world, because it's all or nothing, right? You're not just going to go to, like, France. You're going to go all the way around. And it was a lot of pressure to start up in Australia for myself and my 3 kids and my husband. And we didn't have any family or really many friends here. And we separated. It was very sad. But I went back to engineering, and twice I was the only engineer at work. And it wasn't fun, because I didn't have anyone to bounce ideas off. I didn't have any motivation, and I was working directly with like a business owner and someone who was managing. And they would ask things of me that were like, yeah, but hey, I don't think you understand. I would have to rebuild your whole databases. Like, literally, these tables don't join like that. And they didn't get it, and it was very difficult and frustrating. So I actually moved into recruiting because an opportunity came up, and it was more money. I needed more money because I was a single mum with 3 kids. And it was good. It was fun. I worked with some lovely people who were actually ex-engineers, so I didn't feel that I didn't fit or anything. It was great. But then COVID happened, and suddenly I'm at home. I'm not pairing with anyone. I'm not working with anyone. I'm literally left to my own devices. And I was getting task paralysis. I was getting a lot of like wait mode things, like I need to do this, but I'm going to get a parcel delivered at 4 o'clock, so I can't do anything all day until that parcel is delivered. Wait, a lot of people are nodding. Shocking. Wow. But yeah, and there were so many things that upset me about COVID because of the fact that I was at home, and there was less communication, and there was less clear instructions on what I should be and shouldn't be doing. And eventually I actually just, decided that wasn't going to, like, there was a opportunity to leave, so I did. And the next job just sort of was an internal job, And there was some office, like going into the office involved. So I was like, okay, internal recruiter. And they approached me and I went for it. And it was okay, it was good, enjoyed it. But there was different culture to what I was used to. And so definitely not like an engineering like culture. I had to be like neurotypical, like very neurotypical. And it was weird. And these people felt weird. I didn't think I fit in. And then Culture Amp found me and offered me a better job doing technical recruitment. And the culture of Culture Amp was well known. And it was like the nicest manager you can imagine. And I was there for a few months and she left. I was like, what? Don't leave. But she left and I had another manager. I didn't like change. I don't like to have change where I'm not in charge of that change. I like to, have some say in changes. But at that time, I also decided, you know what, I want to go back into engineering. That's my happy place. That's my happy space. The money is not any different for a recruiter than it is for an engineer. And I know what will make me happy. And I was working on our front end with some amazing mentors in this room, Kevin, Paul, so many lovely people helped me just get back on track with software engineering. And last week I started back again, officially full-time as an engineer. And it's the nicest space, and it's my people. It's so good. So yeah, that's me. Last year I got diagnosed. And suddenly, everything made sense in my whole life, made sense. I was no longer this person I thought was a failure. I actually felt empowered. I found a community of all these people who were just like me. I was like, wow. My mind was blown that actually there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just different. And to give something a label was just fantastic. And then medication and speaking to a therapist, because I always got diagnosed with depression and anxiety and more depression and this drug, that drug, and nothing really actually made any difference because I was still always late for things and I was still always struggling with verbal instructions and sensory overload and lots and lots of things that just didn't make sense, and I just thought there's something wrong with me. All right, so that then leads me on to why was it only last year that I got a diagnosis after going to doctors so many times? Guess what the average age for a male is in being diagnosed with ADHD? 5 to 10 years old. Guess what it is for a woman or female? Any ideas? 30? Anyone else? 45. You're right. Most of the women in this room who may have ADHD don't know it. A lot of the men won't, but the majority of women will not know until an average age of 45 means just a bit below, just a bit above. Hey, crikey, that's shit. Why? Why do men get it all every time? Why are we always behind? Until recently, all the focus on symptoms was symptoms of male ADHD. Females have different symptoms. We're also very good at masking. We have been taught from a very young age not to be boisterous, because boisterous is physically showing ADHD, but also not to talk too much. I used to get pinched, like I said. And stares. Oh my God, if my mom wasn't next to me, she'd stare at me, like right in the eye. Wait till you get home stare. Yeah, that was awful. But we're taught to fit in and mask, and our symptoms are different. evolution matters. And in recognizing that the notion that conditions like autism, dyslexia, ADHD, they're naturally occurring. Basically, these are naturally occurring cognitive variations with distinct strengths and have contributed to the evolution of technology and culture rather than mere checklists of deficits and dysfunctions. And in terms of evolution, the pace of... So when I talk about evolution, the reason why, and there's a lot of research going on about this right now, the reason I talk about it's not a dysfunction or it's actually a design, human race is actually designed with neurodiversity, because in order to get new pasture lands, in order to find new things, in order for technology to grow at the rate it does, you need people who are creative, who think differently, who are wired to be able to not do the daily grind and think, well, actually, there's a better way of doing this, and to be able to see patterns and find new sources of food, etc., etc., etc. And so what's happened, though, is that although we're actually here because of neurodiversity, the genetic evolution, like our minds, etc., and neurodiversity is genetic, it takes a whole generation to get to the next sort of level. And it takes millions of years for genetics to evolve and people to evolve neurodiversity. But society evolves at a much, much, much faster rate. And society has evolved over the last couple of thousand years to actually marginalize people who are neurodiverse and actually say, well, you're not normal, and we need you to do it this way, or you're not included. And so suddenly we're considering like people who are eccentric or neurologically diverse, we're considering them as broken and unsuitable for social circumstances. And the whole work culture and conforming, it marginalizes the workforce who's been engineered into our society to help the survival of our species. We wouldn't be here. So it's not a design flaw. We are perfectly designed. It's society that's flawed. And I think that inclusivity should be reflected in policies and procedures in workplaces, and accommodations and resources should be available for all employees, regardless of their neurological difference. Regular training and education on neurodiversity and inclusivity should be provided to all employees to promote understanding and awareness. And creating a welcoming and inclusive environment also means that you're mindful of language and avoid stereotyping and assuming. You can treat people with respect, empathy, open-mindedness, and a workplace where everyone feels valued and included. The diversity of thought is a valuable asset, and it leads to increased innovation, creativity, and productivity. And companies have recognized this diversity, the value of diversity, and established programs to support and accommodate neurodivergent employees. Companies like Microsoft, SAP, Oracle, actually are leading the way in neurodiversity and inclusion in workplaces. And I'm not just talking about hiring side of things, but actually then being able to go the extra step and be inclusive in accommodating during their time in their work. And I also believe the ADF, Australian Defence Force, now actively look for autistic people to help in the, because we're better at recognizing patterns. And this is something that's happened because we found out that the Israelis have been doing it in their defense force. and they're usually quite good with defense, so we've kind of copied them. And so now suddenly there's a lot of people interested in these skills, but it's slow. It's slow to get out, it's slow to change a culture of a company, especially when that company's culture is always looking for people who will fit in and add value in certain ways that are very neurotypical. Research shows that companies with diverse workforces, including neurodiverse individuals, perform better financially and have more innovative and creative culture. And this is because neurodivergent individuals bring these unique perspectives. Temple Grandin was diagnosed with autism at a young age, and she went on to become a world-renowned animal behaviorist and autism advocate. Her unique perspective and exceptional attention to detail have made her an invaluable asset in the field, and it was because she was diagnosed early and she had support. So, common misunderstandings. How would you feel if I interrupted you when you're talking? Anyone? Yeah. How I feel. I just thought of something and I have to respond now, else I'll forget, followed by shame and guilt. I have a few examples of how I feel, how you feel, but I'm running out of time here. I'm getting eyes. But basically, if you share a story and I share a story back, it's me saying, I've got 1 minute left, it's me saying I connect with you and empathize with you, not it's all about me. And so someone behaving in a neurodivergent way versus jerk behavior, the biggest difference is intention. Consider this. Would you ever ask someone in a wheelchair to stand up at work? No, because that would make you a jerk. Well, then don't expect neurodivergence to conform to neurotypical standards at work. Physical and mental disabilities are still disabilities because one is silent doesn't mean it's anything less. Thank you.